Have you been running so hard for so long that you don't remember what standing still feels like? You've checked all of the boxes, you've built the career, you've earned the title, and you've created the life that you've worked so hard for. And then one day you find yourself staring in the mirror, not recognizing the person looking back. What do you do when the pace that got you here is the very thing that's breaking you? Welcome to the WTF podcast, friends. My name is Molly Smith, and I'm on a mission equipping a million people with the tools to recognize when they're in the funk, but more importantly, how to pivot out of it. By tuning in today, you've joined me on this mission, and I am so glad you are here. My guest today spent over 20 years climbing one of the biggest corporate ladders and making it all the way to partner at PwC. But in the middle of that hustle and grind to get there, something cracked. Suzanne found herself staring in the mirror, not recognizing who was looking back, and she knew something had to change. But what she did next, most people wouldn't dare to attempt. She took an adult gap year. She disconnected completely, and in that space, she did the hardest work of her life. What she discovered changed everything, not just for her and her family, but for the countless leaders she now guides through their own version of that journey. Please join me in welcoming Suzanne Roske to the WTF podcast. Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, Molly. It's so great to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. This is such an interesting story. I've never heard of an adult gap year. But let's just start and let's just get a little bit of background first. When people ask you what you do today as a result of what we're going to talk about in this episode, what do you tell them?
I help high achievers pause, figure
Mm.
out who they are becoming, reconnect with that person so that they can live a life that is authentically theirs.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing. I could have used you a couple of years ago.
I could have used myself several years ago, too.
Of course, of course. Okay, so what did it feel like to be somebody who was completely fueled by the next thing, whatever was next?
It felt like normal because I was the kid in school that was the gold sticker. I had to get all the A's. My mom tells this story of when I was in kindergarten that
Yeah.
there was the Bluebird reading group and the Redbirds, and the Bluebirds were the best. I was a Redbird, and that was completely unacceptable for my 5-year-old little brain. And
Oh,
so I went home and I just started reading everything I could, not because I wanted to enjoy reading, but because I wanted to be a Bluebird because it was the best.
yes.
So I think I was wired in a way that made me want to achieve. And then because society puts that on top of us,
Uh,
that you're constantly evaluated and you're going after the next thing. Honestly, Molly, I never stopped to think about it.
it was just your way of
Scary.
operating.
It was the way of operating. I was rewarded for it. And that's the scariest thing that I got to this point where I was like, what? How did I get here? And am I
Yeah,
even where I want to be?
right.
Because I was just constantly going after the thing that was next.
I think that our society just operates that way. So we're taught that, like, when we get good grades or when we make the right choice, we're good. And if we don't, we're bad. And so we get this self worth all tied up in performance. I could go on for days about that. So take us back to that season where you were working at PwC and you were working your way up to partner. So before you had that kind of moment in the mirror. So take us back there. What was going on in your life?
Yeah, I will say I loved what I did at the firm. For the longest time, I loved helping my clients. I loved building my team. I loved that hustle and bustle and the energy that came with it.
Mhm.
And so as I was going through the process of achieving and being put up for partner, it really fueled that dopamine center
Oh, yeah.
all of the time, right? Like, because that's what it's designed to do. And I was constantly on the road meeting with clients. I remember this one time I had to go to lunch to meet somebody in Chicago just for like a hidey ho. And I live in Washington, D.C. And so it was like I flew out, went to lunch, came back, and that was like a normal day of
Wow.
flying places and coming back. So it was really just wrapped up in that. And it got to the point where I used to say I could keep about 10 plates spinning in the air. And when I got
Yes.
over that, I would just like hope that I could throw it up high enough that one wouldn't come down on my head.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that it started getting out of control because I felt like I was constantly just throwing something up higher and hoping I could manage everything and got enough loft on the one thing that I had tossed that it wouldn't hit me in the head. And that's really stressful.
Yeah, over time, for sure it is. Give me a sense of, like, how many years was that your kind of MO?
So I was with PwC for almost 20 years, and I was in the consulting world for over 25. So it was who I was. You know, I entered rooms and I'm in DC, and the first question is, "What do you do?" But
Right.
I entered with I am a PwC partner, and that was
Mhm.
who I was.
Lot of things wrapped up in that identity, right?
So much wrapped up in that
Yeah.
identity. Yeah, because you
Yeah.
worked so hard for it, and that
Mhm.
becomes like what you are measured on
Oh, yeah.
and the worth I placed in myself and I thought others viewed me for was that
Yes.
title.
Absolutely. Okay, take me back to the moment where you're staring into the mirror and not recognizing yourself.
It was a Sunday night. It was February in 2014, and I was in the kind of final lap, maybe like that last kind of push towards partner admission. And my kids were little, three of them under 7. My husband was out of town. The house was just a mess. Like it was just chaos. And I think looking around, that chaos that I saw sort of was this image that I really didn't have it all together, even though I
Yeah.
was trying to keep it all together. And the kids were popped up on sugar. And I just remember losing it because I was asking specifically my son to pick up a toy and he didn't
Mhm.
want to do it. He was dancing around and I lost it and started screaming. And I scared him and I scared myself in that moment because it was a fire truck that I wanted him to pick up.
Yeah.
But for me, it was so much more than a fire truck. It was
Uh,
everything that I had been holding on to just kind of exploded in that
mhm.
moment at this small little boy.
Yeah.
And I remember him looking up at me with tears in his eyes. And the worst part was he looked at me like I was a stranger. He didn't recognize who I was screaming at him in that moment.
Yeah.
And I pulled myself out of the situation and I went into my room. And that's when I like looked in the mirror and I was just like, I don't know this person staring back at me. I was
Yeah.
gray. I had circles under my eyes. And as I stood there looking, I just remembered having this thought of, and it felt like it came from outside of me. I
Okay.
thought, well, I wonder what it would feel like to have a gun. And I was terrified, terrified. Like, where did that thought come from? And I knew it was more than like the normal stress that came with the job. I'd
Right.
never experienced something at that level. And I also knew I was so close. And in that moment, I made a decision. I was so close. Partner was like May, and we're in February.
Yeah.
And I made a decision. I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm going to go get help. I'm going to go see someone, a professional.
Okay. So you didn't tell anybody. You tell your husband?
No, I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my friends. And I certainly didn't tell the people I was working with.
Oh,
Because the one piece of advice I'd gotten through the entire admission process was just don't F it up. And I was like, that could be anything.
that's not good
And
advice.
in that moment, I knew that if I said something to anybody, that was the definition of effing it up.
Right.
And I literally pulled up, like, I mean, I remember like looking at myself and being like, okay. And I felt like I put a mask back on, like a new coat of
Mhm.
shellac on the shiny mask. And I walked out smiling and didn't say anything to anybody.
What did it cost you to keep something that big inside?
I think I just pushed it down.
Yeah.
Like it cost me the truth. It
Yeah.
cost me the worry And I think that because I was able to compartmentalize and to like push that feeling down, and when I got to a therapist, she was like, "You did not take any comfort in that thought. You were scared of it. This is exactly like you were in a stress overload."
Yeah.
So that gave me comfort that, like, look, I just need to push through it, just like everything else in my life. I just need to push through and I will get to the other side. And I think it just cost me always knowing that that stress could cause that much.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
What were you pretending wasn't true about the life you built?
It's such a good and interesting question. I would often hear, again, this little voice that would be like, I just want things to be simple. And I
Oh,
was like,
interesting.
oh, but my life is pretty simple. And I think I was ignoring the complexity that I had built into life
Yeah,
because it was what from the outside the definition of success was. It
no
was what
question.
I wanted. It was, I mean, I was in a position that others were clamoring to be at. And if I didn't make a partner and if I wasn't sitting in the partner chair, there were gads of people lined up who wanted it. And so who was I to complain about that? And
Yeah,
I also didn't tell myself that or let myself believe that I was unhappy
yeah,
because I didn't think I deserved to be.
yeah. Okay, so you're in therapy. At what
Mhm.
point do you make a decision, like a drastic decision that you are gonna take a break? I wanna hear
Okay.
this part.
So let's talk about this because as I
Yeah,
said, that night in February was in 2014.
right.
So I make partner in May and I actually had a really good time. I was learning new stuff, I was helping new clients. I could push myself to say the good outweighs the bad. And
Okay.
it really wasn't until 2020 when I finally said, like, this isn't working. Because every now and again, that little voice would come up and be like, really? This is what
Okay, so
you're going to do?
there was there was a voice of, like, truth and honesty, like, the true authentic Suzanne and what was going on was speaking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, not all the time, but enough that I knew the voice and I knew what it said.
Yes. Oh,
It was
yeah.
always like, really? This is what we're going to be doing?
Yeah.
And every time I heard it, get back down in your little box. And I would just force that voice back down
Yeah.
and push through it. And it really wasn't until 2020 when COVID hit that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Um, everything, because the world had changed so much.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
no longer out of the house traveling. I was at home. I looked around and I was like, how does this place stay afloat? Because honestly, it was like it was held together with bubble gum and baling wire.
Sure.
And I never saw it. I just came home at night and the place was still standing.
Yeah.
And that was really when I was like, oh my God, I need to do something.
Okay. So, how did that decision come about?
So again, I know dates. This was a Tuesday in July.
I believe it.
And
Okay.
and we had rented a little cabin to get out of DC. We were in the mountains and I got an email from my kids' school that said they weren't going back in the fall. I mean, like every other kid in
Yeah.
the world
Yeah.
wasn't going to go back to school.
Yeah.
And that little voice that I had managed to push down into a box just came roaring and was like, you have to do better. You must do
Mm,
better. I didn't have any idea in that moment what better was. So I went for a walk.
okay.
And as I'm out for a walk on this little path in North Carolina in the mountains, again, it was like a voice from outside of my body that came down and said, you don't have to stay here.
Yeah.
Why don't you go somewhere? Like,
Yeah.
get out of Dodge. And literally, I turned around and started walking back to the cabin. And by the time I made it, probably the 2.5 miles back, it was the only thing that made sense. I was holding, it was, I was just like, if we don't do this, if we don't leave, if we don't like, if I don't take a break from this job and figure out how to do better, I don't know what the answer is. And
So
it's
that's so fascinating because it sounds like you had such clarity and certainty on that walk back.
felt like there was a life raft that was put in front
Mhm.
of me and I
Okay,
needed to grab onto it. And if
got
I
it.
didn't, I felt like the life raft was going to disappear like a
And be
mirage
gone.
and I
Yeah.
was going to drown. So it was less clarity and more almost like outright terror of like, holy moly, this is
Okay.
not going to work. And I see an answer. Might not be a logical answer. It might not be an answer any, but it's there. And I'm gonna go after it and take it.
Okay. So after that walk, you go back to the cabin, you tell your
Yeah.
husband? What do you tell him?
He comes in, he was out mountain biking, and I said, I have an idea. It's a crazy idea. I'm like, what if we moved? And he looked at me. Now, I'm sure this took like, you know, 2.5 seconds. It felt like a year and a him
Sure.
looking at me because I'm the person that does the pro con lists and I research everything. It
Mhm.
is not he goes for a mountain bike ride and comes home and I'm like, "Hey, let's move." That's not what happened.
Sure.
Um, and so he looked at me like I had lobsters coming out of my head, and I just remember sitting there going like, "Okay, never mind. Crazy idea. I don't
Okay.
like let's forget that I even said it." And he was like, "Yeah, it is crazy. You are crazy, and we're going to do it."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he owned so quickly.
That is amazing. Okay, so what did that look like? So, like, quickly tell us, like, how did you actually put that into action?
Oh my god. Okay, so I mentioned we're in North Carolina. We had
Mhm.
found a summer camp that my kids were at. We had dropped them off on the Sunday. I come up with this idea on a Tuesday,
Okay.
and we picked them up 2 weeks later. And in that time, we had figured out like where we could go in the world because there were only like 4 countries who would take us as Americans in the middle of the summer 2020,
Yeah.
and had a location, had a verbal agreement to rent a house, and I had already applied for a visa appointment at the consulate. So when we picked our kids up, 14 days, we stopped at Chick-fil-A. We're sitting in the grass and we're like, so we have news. We're moving to Mexico. And they were like, wait, what? Thinking they were being punked or something.
Right, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, it was 2 months later that we landed. So everything went really quickly. Now, I will say there is a beauty in naivete of not
Yes,
really knowing what you're getting into.
of course.
So some of the stuff was really, really easy to do. And then there were other things. We were out walking one day. My husband was a little ahead of me with the dog. And I was like, wait, we can't go. And he was like, why? I said, the mail. What about the mail? It's going to pile up in front of our house and people are going to figure out that we're not here and they're going to rob us and take all of our stuff. We cannot go. And he just looked back at me and he's like, we can't go because of the US Postal Service. Okay. He goes, we're going to figure out the mail, but I'm
Yeah,
not talking about this anymore. We're going. And
yeah,
so there were those little moments where like little things like tripped me up and I'm like, oh my God, we can't do it. This is crazy.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you get to Mexico, you take a leave of absence from PwC,
I
right?
did. I took a sabbatical and
Okay.
just put them on hold.
Okay, that's first of all, that's amazing that you can do that. Lovely. Okay, so what did it actually feel like to completely stop your whole life and like the world and the identity that you have built for yourself for years, decades? What did that feel like?
It was completely unmooring. I had
Okay.
no idea what to do. I describe it like when you really come to that stop, when you're on a treadmill and like you hit that emergency stop button and
It's like,
it's jarring. That's
yes.
what it was. And
Yeah.
my husband asked me that first day, what are you going to do on this adult gap year? And I burst into tears because it was the first time in forever that
Yeah.
I had a plan and I didn't know what the next step actually was.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like I just trying to like, and I'm sure our listeners are doing the same thing. Like, what would it be like to actually pause your life in progress and step out and just go to another country for a period of time and just figure out who you are. Like me, after having done a lot of healing, I'm all that sounds amazing to me, but 4 years ago when I was climbing the corporate ladder and doing all the things, I couldn't have dreamed of it. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, first of all, I will say, and I recognize I was totally privileged to be able to do it, to
Mm,
be able to
sure.
take the pause, to have the organization that would allow me to do that, to have the support of my husband and my kids to say, we have no idea what this is, but we're going to
Yeah.
go anyway.
Yeah.
So I do not take that for granted.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I mean, as I said, I didn't know what else I could. I
Yeah.
just knew this wasn't working. And I also knew if I stayed in the role I was in, I didn't think I was going to be able to extract myself to really see who I was, what I liked to do, what was going to light me up, and where I could really use my strengths to go forward. And so that stopping was super hard. And I will say for the first month,
Okay.
it was a true month of like, I had to tell myself, I'm not going to do something right away.
Yeah.
It was totally my MO. And I took walks. I had a lot to figure out. Like,
Sure.
how do we get water delivered? Uh,
Logistics of living in another
There was a
country.
lot of logistics that I
Yeah.
didn't really understand. Like,
Yeah.
when the bell rang, that meant you had to run the garbage down to the end of the street. So there were a
Huh.
lot of things you just had to figure out.
Sure.
So that took up some time too, but it really took that time for my stress levels to start to come down, where
Yeah.
I could actually think about what I was going to do because I wanted to, not just because I was terrified of not doing something.
That's so powerful, right? Because for a lot of ambitious, high achieving women who have big goals, especially in corporate America, you set your sights on something and you just continue to work, or at least this was me as well as you, like work, 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 and you've got it like it's like you have blinders on because you're so focused on the goal. And when you take the blinders off and you take the goal away, it's like, okay, what do I do with myself? So it doesn't surprise me that it took you a month to just reacclimate to not flying to another city to have lunch and then flying home.
Yeah. I
You know,
often say, especially when I'm working with my clients who are in this exact spot, action masks our anxiety and our discomfort.
oh, wait, pause, wait, say that again. Say that again.
Action action masks our anxiety and our discomfort. So when we start to feel that piece of discomfort, whether it's like, this is not for me anymore, I don't like being in this situation, we're nervous about something, we go into action because that's what we know and that's what
Yeah.
we're good at. And that is what has been rewarded. And so if you
Yes.
want to get out of that cycle, you actually have to pause
Oh,
and take that break. And it, I mean, we'll get to this. It doesn't have to be a year. That's the crazy
yes.
thing.
Yes. Okay. So it takes you a month to unwind and figure out what's what. What did you discover about yourself when nobody was keeping score, when there was no goal to be achieved? Give me some of the insights that you discovered about you.
I loved living in the world and I'd still love living in the world of I don't know and
Okay,
we'll figure it out.
tell me more about that.
I mean, think about it. I was a partner at a consulting firm. I was paid to have answers. And what I loved to do was actually sit in a problem and say, this is really interesting and I don't have an answer, but let's
Mm,
figure it out together. And that to me
yeah.
was incredibly exciting.
Yes.
Not so valuable as a partner at a consulting firm who's paid to have the answers. So I knew
Sure.
something was kind of off. I did find out that I liked things a lot more simple. I mean, we
Okay.
went down there with, 2 bags each. We did
Okay.
take the dog, that's a whole other story. And, each family member got to bring one non-essential item. So, like mine, I brought the Christmas stockings.
Okay.
And, like, my son brought his guitar, and my daughter brought her comforter. But we all had one non-essential item, and that's the only thing we brought from home, other than some
Wow.
pictures in our and, like, clothes that you could fit in suitcases.
Yeah.
And I was fine. I didn't need all the stuff that I
Stuff.
had thought I needed. And so that idea of that little word that kept coming was like, I just want
Yeah.
something like I got simplicity
Mhm.
and I loved it.
Okay. That's amazing. Okay. How long did you spend in Mexico?
We were there for 8 months.
8 months.
Mhm. And I cried like a baby when we came home.
Oh, oh, really?
I did not want to come.
Okay. Now I've got a couple more questions for you, but I wanna finish off the story. So you come home after 8 months. What do you go back to PwC? What is the transition back into the old life and identity that
Yeah,
you left? What was that like?
really hard. I describe it because I talk in metaphors all the time as if you ever had a pair of your favorite shoes and they
Oh,
felt
yeah.
super duper comfortable and then
Oh,
you don't
yeah.
wear them for a while and you put them back on, maybe they got wet, maybe something happened and they're just tight.
Oh, yeah.
That's how life felt. Everything felt tight. Very familiar, but also really tight and constricting at the same time.
Yeah.
And I did go back to the firm. I changed what I was doing because one of the things I discovered when I was in Mexico is what I had really loved throughout the course of my life was helping develop my teams and helping my clients develop their teams. So I moved
Okay.
from a regulatory role
Sure.
into a more people-centric role. And I thought, hey, this is the answer to all of my problems. I'm just going
Okay.
to shift what I am doing. And it was okay. It
Okay.
wasn't like their nirvana that I thought it was going to be when I was
Sure.
saying, but also it was a nice way to come back. And again, super lucky that they took me back and allowed me to make this change. Ultimately, wasn't the place I was meant to be.
Okay. So you ended up resigning?
I did. I ended up resigning. I remember being in a big corporate boondoggle in a ballroom, and there's a guest speaker. And the guest speaker is talking about values and about how you should treat your employees. And it was all of the stuff that you wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And I knew it wasn't the stuff that I was going to be able to do where I
Mm.
was.
Yeah.
And I describe it like this because I don't think that like an organization is necessarily bad. I mean, there are bad organizations,
Sure.
but I grew and I outgrew where I was.
Yeah.
And there's
Nothing
nothing
fit.
wrong with that. It didn't
Right.
fit anymore.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is what we want to do as humans is to
Yeah.
keep evolving.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is when you recognize that you have outgrown the life that you have built, the role that you have worked on for so long. What
Yes.
most of us do is hold on to it. I held on to it. I held on to it for years
Yeah.
because it's what I thought I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And once you recognize that, like, you have grown and maybe the organization has grown in a different direction, there's nothing wrong with saying, this doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so you resign from PwC.
Mhm.
From this experience, you're now doing this work with other women. How did the vision and the mission for what you're doing now come together?
I thought about what I needed and
Mhm.
who I would have needed while I was in Mexico because I did it all by myself.
Yeah.
I figured out my values. And I always say to people, like, look, you can do this work by yourself,
Yeah.
but having somebody who can provide accountability and some structure, that's huge because it took me over 8 months to figure my way through this. And so I sort of looked at it and said, I'm not the only one because when I started telling my story, so many people were like, oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. And I was like, well, then there's more of us out there. And
Yes.
so I want to work with them. The other thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to take people back to Mexico and
Okay.
never. So that was another thing. I was like, and
Yeah.
maybe it was because I never got anybody, nobody could come visit us because of COVID. But I was
Yeah.
like, I want to showcase this community and this land and this place that I left part of my heart in that
Mhm.
really helped heal me
Yeah.
in a way that I hadn't been able to do here. And so that was another piece of it of just wanting to take people back there.
That is so great. So you are helping people take the gap, whatever however long that period of time is. It might not be a year, it can be a week or whatever, but taking them out of the space that they are in right now and give them an opportunity to pause, right?
And teaching them how to create that space for themselves.
Yes. That is
That we
so
sit,
valuable.
yeah, that we can sit in the pause and it's going to
Mm,
be okay.
yeah. Yeah.
And whether that pause, like you said, it doesn't have to be a year. I call it an adult gap year, but it's
Yeah.
less about the duration and more about the intention. The
Yes.
intention of the pause is to say, am I doing things that align with who I am and what matters to me today and in this season of my life? Not what mattered to me 20 years ago or
Correct.
5 years ago, but what matters today and what's going to matter going forward, because that changes. So,
Yes.
really getting clear on that and learning then in that pause, whether it's 15
Yeah.
seconds before you say yes to the next thing
Mm,
that's put in front of you, and you really say, like,
right.
oh, is this the thing that I want to do? Or it is a week, giving and helping people develop those tools so
Yes.
that they can really be grounded in who they
Yes.
are and what they authentically bring and their strengths that they can bring into this world.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay. What do you know about the pause now that you couldn't have put into words before Mexico?
How valuable it is.
Yeah.
I always thought that if you weren't doing, you had no value.
Yeah.
That idea of our value is based on productivity.
Yeah.
That to me was the thing. That plus the way I was wired, plus the whole action, just it spins you up.
Yeah.
And what I have found is those moments of pausing, stepping
Yes.
back, taking the moment is when clarity comes in and you
Yes.
can really wrap your head around what you're doing and why you're doing it
Yeah.
and then move forward with that intention. And I wouldn't have said that prior to Mexico.
Yeah. Oof. So good. Okay. For somebody who is listening right now, who is white knuckling their life, one that no longer fits, what advice would you give them if they're in that spot today?
They're going to have to find a spot and a time to make space for the pause because none of this can be done
Yeah.
without the pause. And I talk about the power of the pause. And so the first step is to pause, literally. Now, it doesn't have to be like I'm a terrible meditator.
Okay.
So if sitting and pausing isn't for you, go for a walk without headphones,
Yeah.
without your phone. Just give yourself space to disconnect and not jump into the next thing.
Yeah.
And when you can find that space, then you can attune to what matters most to you. And so
Yes.
that's the A of the pause. The U is unmask. You've got to figure out
Mm.
what roles and what you're doing that no longer fits your life. What's not yours to
Yeah.
hold that you are still carrying around, thinking you have to muscle your way through it?
Correct.
And there
Yes.
are things you're going to have to take care of, but there are things
Sure.
you can probably let go of. So we really need to find what that is and then let go of those.
Yeah.
And then you've got to shape what your vision of success is going to be. Not what society says, not what you thought it was
Yes.
when you were 20, but what it means for you today and in the future.
Yes.
And then, and this is the hard part sometimes for people, is you embody it because There are so many options out there
Mm.
that, and this is where I got tripped up when I started doing the work myself. Because when I started to think about what the shape of my life could take, I had so many options and I thought I
Oh,
was making progress. And then someone said to me, "You're walking in circles. You
oh,
feel like you're doing something, but you're walking around just moving one leg. So when are you going to say yes to one possibility, which means you're going to have to say no to a bunch of others and
yeah,
try it and see if it works?" And so that's that embodiment of let's try it. And the process is iterative.
sure.
So it's sort of like a design thinking, like you're figuring out the cheapest, quickest way to experiment and see if it works.
Yes.
And if it doesn't, like, let's go back to the
Try
drawing
again.
board, figure it out. Like, but
Yeah,
not waiting until you have everything so perfectly baked to do something because you will
yeah.
stay in
Stop.
world of just let me tweak it and let me put the I and cross the T and do all the things and you will
Right.
not move.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that
So those
analysis
are the
paralysis.
five skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the five skills that I work on and the process that I take my clients through.
Oh, that's so awesome. Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with our audience. Hey, everybody, if this episode touched you in some way or somebody came to mind when you were listening to this episode, do yourself and them a favor and please forward a copy of this episode, a link to this episode to them and share it. It is going to help them pivot out of the funk of being in a life that no longer fits, introduce the idea of an adult gap year or any type of gap, which I think is just amazing. And it's also going to help me in my mission of equipping a million people with the tools to recognize the funk and pivot out of it. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.